Land of the Covenant, the Holy Land. Each of us has an idea what it should be, depending on our faith, background, age. But all the ideas have something in common with its basis. Where did these ideas come from? Even if one has studied the Holy Bible, there are no pictures nor even descriptions. Not many writers nor painters from the past whose words were devoted to this theme ever succeeded in staying here, perceiving the miraculous influence that comes from this land. Or maybe it's our memory, genetic, spiritual memory of genus Homo. Probably that's what feeds our imagination, creates our ideas. And if we do our best, we can recollect. And the Lord God planted a garden toward the east in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. There is no evidence Eden was right here, but this place is called Eden, and probably Adam and Eve, our ancestors, lived in a garden like this. And out of the ground the Lord God caused to grow the tree of life, also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided. Water, streams, and springs in modern Eden form the source of the river whose name is, but that will be another item in memory. Here they are, the main Jordan sources. The Dan originated in Eden, and the Banyas. Melted snow flowing down from the holy mountain Hermon feed both of them. Here it's the Jordan. It crosses the Holy Land from north to south, permanently changing its face. Peer into these waters, strain your memory. Now in those days, John the Baptist came preaching, and they were being baptized by him in the Jordan River as they confessed their sins. And 1,000 years before, when those who carried the ark came into the Jordan, that the waters which were flowing down from above stood, while all Israel crossed on dry ground. And there was a man who had crossed those waters earlier, the first man who had adopted the faith in one God. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all their possessions which they had accumulated in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus they came to the land of Canaan. They crossed the Jordan here and moved to the south towards the valley of the Jordan, the most fertile one as it was 4,000 years ago and is just the same now. And Abram passed through the land, and Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev, to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. He had passed through the Negev wilderness, going down away from the land of Canaan, and coming back through the same wilderness, he settled in the leafy forest Mamre. Abram's nephew Lot dwelt on the Dead Sea shore. There was a fertile valley where prosperous cities were located, where fields grew up green and gardens fruited. However, the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah suffered a great punishment for their sins. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities, and all the valley, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But his wife, Lot's wife, from behind him, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Abram went away from the leafy forest Mamre after the Sodom and Gomorrah punishment, and journeyed from there toward the land of the Negev. Then he sojourned in Gerar. Gerar was located on the very spot that is now called Tel Shirah. Here Sarah gave birth to a son, Isaac, for the 100-year-old Abram. Here he turned out his bondwoman Hagar and their son Ishmael. And she departed and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. Somewhere here, nearby the contemporary city Yerucham, God presented her with a well. And God was with the lad, and he grew, and he lived in the wilderness. As the Quran tells it, Ishmael is the ancestor of the Arabic generations. Thus Abram, his wife Sarah, and their son Isaac lived happily for a long time. But God prepared a new ordeal for them. Take now your son, your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. Abram came to the place that God had pointed him to, and built there a sacrificial altar. It happened here on the very spot where Jerusalem stands now, on the place hidden from our view by the Mosque of Omar, near the cornerstone. Begin from the beginning. Because you have not withheld your son, your only son, indeed I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Two nations are in your womb, and two people shall be separated from your body. Thus God said to Rebekah, Isaac's wife, and she bore two sons. Esau and Jacob. Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a peaceful man, living in tents. The hunter Esau went out there in search for game. These places have preserved their primitive beauty even today. Every day, he exposed his life to danger. That's why he didn't take into account the everyday problems of the people. But it was not the same with his younger brother, and that was the reason why Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of lentil soup. Thus Jacob deceived Esau, and Jacob was blessed and charged by his father, and then he slipped away from here to Haran. Many years after, Jacob returned to his native land with 20 sons of his own. His sons are the records of the generations of Israel. They pastured cattle, but there was no peace among them. They hated Joseph, their youngest brother. And here, in the valley called Dothan, they sold him to Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. They brought him by the road along the coast, where rich seaside cities, including Jaffa, were located. Nowadays, Jaffa is part of Tel Aviv, but once it was one of the greatest seaports on the Oriental Mediterranean. Legend tells us that Jaffa was named in honor of Noah's son, Japhet, who founded it. Do you remember the righteous Jonah story? And the Lord appointed a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the stomach of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. Then the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah up onto the dry land. That occurred right here near the seaside where Jaffa is located. There was a vision to Apostle Peter on the roof of this house. And a voice came to him, "What God has cleaned, no longer consider unholy." And to this day, pilgrims still come up here. Nowadays, Jaffa is a painters' and sculptors' city. A good number of studios and galleries are located here, as if a creative spirit is wandering around. Obviously, there is something strange here. Legend tells us that Noah built his ark on this very spot on the Jaffa seashore. And here comes another memory and another sea, the Red Sea. Israelites led by Moses came up here to the land of Canaan. Once the town of Etzion Geber was located here. And they journeyed from Etzion Geber and camped in the wilderness of Zin, that is, Kadesh. Here it is, the wilderness of Zin. And there is a place on the territory of today's Egypt where the sons of Israel camped after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And here are the ruins of the Canaan city, Arad, the records of which you are able to find in books of the Old Testament. The king of Arad was the first Canaanite king who fought against Israel, and the Lord heard the voice of Israel and delivered up the Canaanites. Then they utterly destroyed them and their cities. And they journeyed from Kadesh and camped at Mount Or. Then Aaron the priest went up to Mount Or and died there. Mount Or has not been found yet. Any peak in front of us might just be the one. They set out from Mount Or by way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. Moses led his people through this valley where the Jordan frontier lies to the land that God showed him. Moses knew that he couldn't enter this land. Another book of the Old Testament starts here, and another memory. Joshua ben Nun conquered the Canaanite land and the Canaanite cities of Gezer, Azekah, Socho, Aphek, Megiddo, and others upon the order of God. Thus Joshua took all that land, the hill country and all the Negev, all that land of Goshen, the lowland, and the Arava, the hill country of Israel and its lowland, gave it for inheritance to Israel according to their divisions. Thus the land rest from war. But they couldn't rest on laurels for a long time. Then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the anger of the Lord burned, and he sold them into the hands of their enemies, so that they were severely distressed. Then the Lord raised up judges who delivered them. Deborah, a prophetess, was the judge in Israel in the hill country of Ephraim between Ramah and Bethel. She gathered the troops which destroyed 900 iron chariots of Yabin, the king of Hatzor, here at Mount Tabor. Yabin's army came from Megiddo from the river Kishon. At the foot of Mount Tabor, they were ambushed. The army fell by the edge of the sword. Not even one was left. And the land was undisturbed for 40 years. Samson of Dan's division dwelt here between Sorek and Ashtaol. He was the judge in Israel for 40 years in the days of the Philistines. All of you surely know the Samson and Delilah story. Samson used to go down to the valley where beautiful Delilah settled. She lived here in the valley Sorek that the Philistines possessed in those days. One day she made him sleep and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his hair, and his strength left him. Draw your sword and pierce me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and pierce me through and make sport of me. This mountain, Gilboa, heard these last words of Saul, the first king of Israel. In this valley, Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant in the battle of Aphek and brought it to Azod, now Ashdod, to their god Dagon. But the Israelites won a victory over Dagon, and the Ark reverted back to them. Another action written up in the Holy Bible took place here. Young David fought with the Philistine giant Goliath. It was the first, but not the last, of David's battles. David was 30 years old when he ascended to the throne, and he reigned for 40 years. Jerusalem was built on the same site where David constructed his own city. Today, an Arab village occupies the original spot. Israelis revere his memory, and everyone comes up to his tomb on Mount Zion, all eager to honor the man who laid the foundation for a strong, independent state. And his son Solomon expanded and consolidated Israel. Solomon widened the frontiers of the state and of its capital, Jerusalem. He erected rampart fortifications around the city. The stones used in Solomon's times now lie in the base of the eastern wall. The remains of the cities and fortresses built by Solomon are most impressive with their majesty and power. Solomon constructed and strengthened the city of Megiddo on the hill, which according to the New Testament is known as Armageddon. Here the great battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness will take place at the end of time. King Solomon's mines. All of us have heard of them, although we're not certain of their exact location and where people extracted and smelted bronze. Here we have the valley of Timnah, where the ground is red because of copper, where the fantastic stone mushrooms appeared, where prehistoric people lived in caves, where the grand Solomon pillars of more than 100 million years are dominant. But the genius of Solomon lies in the temple and the city where the temple was built, the eternal city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the city of Solomon where Jesus was brought, the event which changed the world history 2,000 years ago. And darkness fell over the whole land, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. And Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. The angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the descendants of David. And the virgin's name was Mary. And Joseph also went up from Galilee to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, along with Mary, who was with child. And it came about that while they were there, the days were completed for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son. And she wrapped him in cloth, and laid him in a manger. And they returned to Galilee, to their own city of Nazareth. In this city, Jesus continued to grow and become strong. Today, there are a great number of Christian churches of different confessions, among them the majestic Basilica of the Temple of the Annunciation. He grew up here, and from here Jesus went to be baptized by John in the Jordan. And immediately coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens opening, and the Spirit like a dove descending upon him. And Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan, and was led about by the Spirit in the wilderness for 40 days, while tempted by the devil. and he ate nothing during those days. And Jesus returned to the Galilee in the power of the Spirit. News about him spread through all the surrounding district, and he began teaching in their synagogues and was praised by all. And he came down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and he was teaching them on Sabbath days. And there was a man in the synagogue possessed by the spirit of an unclean demon. And he cried out with a loud voice, and Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be quiet, and come out of him." Everyone saw it. Walls and columns of this ancient synagogue in Capernaum heard it. And he arose and left the synagogue and entered Simon's home. Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever. He rebuked the fever, and it left her. And the report about him was getting out into every locality in the surrounding district. The Lake Kinneret is called in the Gospel the Sea of Tiberias. Here Jesus found his disciples, turned later into apostles. On this very spot, he taught people with parables. He banished demons. He walked upon the water as upon the dry land. He tamed the storm. The miracle of fish also took place here. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. These words were spoken here on Mount Beatitudes. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other. Give to everyone who asks of you, and whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. And just as you want men to treat you, treat them in the same way. Once Jesus went up with his disciples to the land of Gennesaret, and when they crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore. Here it is, the valley of Gennesaret, the land of Gennesaret. Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside the man which, going into him, can defile him. But the things which proceed out of the man are what defile him. Here on the western shore of the Sea of Tiberias, Migdal stood, from where Mary Magdalene came to Jesus, and just a bit further to the north, Bethsaida and Chorazin, the towns Jesus cursed. To this very spot, to the tomb of Eliah the prophet, in Caesarea Philippi, he came with his disciples. He said, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected, and be killed, and be raised up on the third day." And 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and James and John with him and brought them to a high mountain by themselves. and he was transfigured before them. It took place here on the mountain Tabor. Here Moses and Eliah the prophet were conversing with Jesus. Then a cloud formed, overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud, "This is my beloved Son." At these gates, Jesus entered into Jerusalem with his disciples. He went along these streets to the room which his disciples had found for Passover. He went to the Last Supper. And these words were sounded in this room, "Truly I say to you that one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. I shall never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God." And after singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives, and they came to a place named Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here until I have prayed." The way of the man of sorrows started here. Today, pilgrims and hikers walk along Via Dolorosa, the most well-known street among Christians. They stop where Jesus stopped. They come to the great building, the Temple of the Holy Sepulchre, constructed over the mountain Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified, and over the cave where Jesus was buried. After these things, Jesus manifested himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. This church was built over the place where Christ rose again from the dead on the third day and manifested to his disciples. Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Tend my lambs, shepherd my sheep, tend my sheep." And his disciples went out and preached throughout the world. This is Caesarea. They brought the apostle Peter by order of Sultan Cornelius here to the Roman procurator's capital, to the city King Herod the Great had built. Peter preached here, and he ordered them to be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. Here in Caesarea, the Roman court was held over Apostle Saul, who was also known as Paul. They sent him down away from here to Rome. The Christian army knights came here to fight for the Holy Sepulchres about 1,000 years later. They constructed their own city at the same place. It was meager when compared to the Romans, who used marble columns and granite plates that King Herod had used earlier. Crusaders fortified the city rapidly and well, so it became the Christian army outpost on the seashore. There was a temple where a Christian relic was guarded, St. Grail's chalice. Caesarea, a museum under the open sky, the witness to age-old events. And this is Acre, another city of the Crusaders, the Eastern Latin Kingdom capital. Here the Apostle Paul stopped, returning from Cyprus. Richard the Lion-Hearted visited this very place. Princess Berenice met the Emperor Titus here. Houses and churches built by the Crusaders have remained in Acre to this day. And something rather exciting, a vast underground citadel. Here feasts for the knights took place. Troubadours sang. Ladies were radiant with beauty. Here the knights made a historic decision to prolong the campaign against Damascus. Thus, a new religion became firmly established in this land and all over the world. This faith that professes love and mercy to your neighbor. It was deeply rooted in a more ancient religion, and both religions coexist and both worship God. According to Christian tradition, God will appear in the valley Arbel, and here we'll meet Eliah the prophet. And on the summit of the Mount of Olives, he will rule on the last judgment, and he will enter Jerusalem through the golden gates. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Clothe yourself in your beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. Thus Isaiah the prophet foretold the future of the great city, the eternal city, the city of three religions. Lift up your eyes round about and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Open the gates, that the righteous nation may enter, the one that remains faithful.
This city wall, 안궁이 자리 잡고 있었던 지역에 해당되고 전체적으로 예루살렘은
entre la création et l'histoire de ce pays, c'est la cité.
Мы сейчас продали, я уже сказал, еврейский. Почему он называется еврейский, понятно?
Today, thousands of pilgrims and tourists from all over the world come to Jerusalem to worship the Holy Land, to wander along the ancient streets, to touch the stones marked with age. Here you come in contact with your surroundings almost imperceptibly. When we're in Jerusalem, we involuntarily find ourselves inside vivid history. We breathe its aura and are constantly stirred by contradictory feelings which reign here. The great Jewish holy place, the Wailing Wall, all that remains of the western wall of the Temple Court. Solomon had built it, and the Romans finally destroyed it. It is at the foot of the Mosque of Omar, the third sacred Muslim place, and next to the Garden of Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives. This is the western wall that all the Jews face while praying. The wall they come to pray to God, to reveal to Him their problems and misfortunes, and leave their written requests in the crevices of the stones. Be joyful with Jerusalem and rejoice for her, all you who love her. Be exceedingly glad with her, all you who mourn over her. And there will no longer be heard in her the voice of weeping and the sound of crying. Your sun will set no more, neither will your moon wane.